Hello, here's Faye. Today I'm going to give you my wrap up of the BookTubeAthon, which was not as successful as I'd hoped. Obviously the goal was to read 7 books. I read 3, maybe 4 if you count one that I had already started before. But I'll jump right in. Let me know what you think. Tell me if you disagree with my opinions, or, you know, we can also gush together about the same books. Either way, I like talking about books with you. The first one I read was The Sense of an Ending by Julian. I picked this book, obviously it was on my TBR shelf, I've bought it, so I should read it, but it's also super pretty, I think, and that was one of the prompts. This follows our main character, Tony, I believe he was called, as he is now an adult and he's reminiscing about his times in high school with his 3 high school friends, and together they were just a super pretentious, wannabe philosophical bunch. And he has lost touch with them, and he has especially lost touch with his friend Adrian, who was always the most enviable, the most intelligent of the bunch, or so he seems to think. And they no longer speak with each other. I won't say more because it's a thin book, and you know, the more I say, the less point there is to reading this book. I do think there is a point to reading this book. I enjoyed it. It is basically just a long stream of this guy's thoughts. There's no real chapters, and it's pondering how good, I guess, Tony's memory is of what happened, how much he's romanticizing his youth, and his relationships. I thought it was funny thinking about this book because it's not a thriller, but it's sort of become en vogue now to talk about unreliable narrators in thrillers, and usually those unreliable narrators are women. Figures. And this is not a thriller, and it's a male main character, and still he's not reliable necessarily as a character. I thought that was interesting. Still, I ended up giving it only 3 out of 5 stars. I think I just lost steam a bit in the end. I thought the idea was really well thought out, but in the end the shocking moment in the end just wasn't that shocking to me. And I watched the trailer, finding out because of reading this that there was a movie made out of this last year, I believe, and the trailer looks much more exciting than the book, even after having seen the book and realizing what the trailer is pointing towards, sort of what big reveal. So I think I might watch that. I didn't end up watching any movies last week, which I should have if I'd stuck to the challenges of the BookTubeAthon, but this I think is a movie that would be quite interesting to watch. First book down. Well, actually the first book I read, I just realised I didn't start with the first one. The first book I read was Chucky by John Wyndham. Whoa. This was the coin test told me to read this first, and I did in fact do as the coin told me. This is my second John Wyndham, about this boy who has an imaginary friend, or so his parents think, and then that story unfolds and they become less and less sure that this friend is indeed imaginary, but why can no one see him and what's going on. What I loved about this book is it is fantasy, for lack of a better word, or fantastical in its content. I'm being complicated about this, but it's not action packed, and I liked it. The whole book, you have this impending doom. You feel like something horrible is going to happen, and nothing horrible happens as in, you know, death and horror and explosions as you would expect, maybe sort of from the more popular modern sort of horror fantasy novels. But this is very quiet and still really spooky. I really recommend it. I loved it. I read The Day of the Triffids last year by John Wyndham, and I think I'm just going to slowly push on and read all of his books. Luckily, they are also not very thick, so that should be doable, and this was a great one to start my week with. Then I finished Cannery Road by John Steinbeck. This is also a small little book. There's, you know, I had my methods to try and get through a lot of books in this week. This I had started previously, and even though it is so small, I really struggled. I think I read this over weeks and just sort of little pieces of it. This book by John Steinbeck, my boyfriend basically suggested I read because he really loves John Steinbeck. I've only read Of Mice and Men by his, I just really struggled. I thought lots Oh, so hot. Lots of elements of this story I just thought were too disconnected. We basically find out about this neighborhood on this Cannery Street, Cannery Row, sorry, and how their lives are attached and what like a feeling of home and community means, and yeah, just depressing. And I found myself getting really angry at the characters for really small things, just getting annoyed with them and not really, I wasn't really sure how to interpret the story either, whether this was total idealization of your sort of typical American person somewhere in a small town, or whether it was in fact highly critical of all these characters. Maybe this is just not my time, book genre, book time, I don't know. This is not an era of America I know very much about, so maybe I was lacking context, but I didn't love it. I think I also gave it 3 out of 5 stars because it did make me angry and emotional and frustrated with the characters, which achieving that with what you're writing is I was not bored, but the book itself wasn't my cup of tea. And then there are 2 books I didn't finish. One because I only picked it up on the last evening, I think. Yeah, My Dog Tulip by J.R. Ackerly. This I think I'll read, but I only like 20 pages in already think it's going to be quite a little trivial read about this guy and his dog. The first chapter is about problematic visits to the vet with this dog. And as someone who has a dog and gets really annoyed with my dog at times, sorry to say, when she's really misbehaved, or I feel like that's me failing her, not having trained her properly, I find it quite weird that there is so much literature that loves the fact that dogs are misbehaved. I don't really get it, even though, yes, I did chuckle reading the first chapter. So I will read on, but so far I can't really say much about it. And then I read 2 chapters in How to Develop Emotional Health by Oliver James. This was my way of solving, I don't know, attempting the challenge to read something about something you want to do, and achieving emotional health I think is always good. Only problem with this book is that I heavily disagree with most of the things that are said in it so far. So by achieving emotional health, for instance, I find it difficult to relate to how Oliver James suggests that one of the men he has interviewed in his past is especially emotionally healthy. Little side fact, this man has killed multiple people in his family. And he then goes on to explain why this guy is emotionally healthy. It rubs me up the wrong way. I'm sticking with it because I am not yet convinced that it's a load of crap. Maybe I can just also open myself to accepting someone else's definition of emotional health. And in doing that, I also sort of recalibrate how I think about it. But it's a challenging read for me because I find myself fighting the things, the claims in this book all the time. So that's difficult. And then the final book I read was Matchmaking for Beginners by Maddie, Dawson. This I was expecting to be a fast-paced, easy read, chick lit, and in many ways it was. But then in other ways it was also kind of weird. We follow our main character Marnie, who's 28, 29, something like that, which always nice when the main character of a book is your age. Makes you feel egocentrically very represented on the page. She is set to have this perfect life. She's engaged to this super sexy, suave, funny guy who then just decides that he is petrified of committing to her and basically stands her up at the altar, more or less. So her life is in shambles. She tries patching it up by going back to her parents' home. That also doesn't work out for her really though, and then she finds out that she has inherited her ex-fiancé's great aunt's house in Brooklyn, something along those lines. And she goes to like check out the house basically. And then we meet all these colourful people in Brooklyn, neighbours, friends of this great aunt's, and this sets her down on her path. The matchmaking element of the title is kind of weird. So this great aunt Blix and Marnie, they both have this ability to tell if people are meant to be with each other, and this sort of fantastical aspect in the beginning I wasn't expecting. And first I thought that could be cool, but then I thought it was a bit gimmicky, to be honest, and also just I don't know, just thought that meant it was overstepping people's boundaries, to be honest. Even if you're meant to be together with someone, I still think you have the right to choose not to be. So parts of this bugged me. Parts of the obsessive pairing up characters bugged me. But if you really like that in your chick lit, you just want everyone to be happy in love, and don't accept people being happy and single, then maybe this is for you. Also, if you like a book set in Brooklyn, that was a nice setting. I've never been to Brooklyn, and I do think this book made it sound like a super fun place to visit. So those were all the books I read. I had a fun reading week. I didn't read quite as much as I wanted to, and now looking at my books, I feel like it was a bit of a cop-out choosing so many slim books, but there you go, you do what you gotta do. So now I'm going to enjoy taking the pressure off a little, finishing up maybe some longer books, or even, you know, jumping into some longer books. Let me know how your week went, and if you enjoyed or hated any of these books that I read this week, or if you feel like reading them now. I hope I didn't put you off any of them, because I all think they have their merits. I'm going to talk to you soon though, and until then, bye.